All right, guys. Today we're going to talk about warming up. So, why is warm up important? What are the aspects of warm ups? And finally, how do we go ahead and program warm ups? So, warm ups do a couple things, right? One, the idea of the warm up is to increase blood flow, right? So, in order for us to be successful as a company and for our clients to be successful, blood flow has to be increased to one, prevent injuries, right? So, that's the second point. Increase blood flow, decrease injuries. All right. So, obviously, we want our clients to be working out for the full term of the program without being injured. That's two big things. One of the third things is going to be CNS activation. So as we go ahead and get into our warm-up, you're going to notice that the warm-up begins from slow to fast. That allows us to have our brain communicate signals to our muscles quicker and more responsive as we go along. It also will alleviate burnout or too high of CNS activation too early on. Number 4, work on flexibility. All right, obviously, flexibility is a huge thing. We'll go into detail about that in a second. And finally, 5th is going to be mobility. And again, we will also hit on that. And then 6, exercise technique. So our job as coaches is not only to work on the first 5, but that 6th one is very important. It's our job as coaches to go around and assess and correct form, correct? So when we're warming up and our clients are warming up, it's very important that we go around, notice their form, and correct their form as we warm up. It's very critical we walk around and talk to our clientele during that and reiterate proper form and technique, okay? So that's the 7 basic reasons. So let's go into this a little more in depth. Blood flow is pretty self-explanatory. We want to increase blood flow to the extremities of our bodies to help increase oxygen to the muscles that we need. So blood flow, increase O2, and get blood to the muscles. Obviously, the decrease in injuries, that's going to be relative from 3, 4, 5 as well, and finally 6, right? So CNS activation, we're going to move our warm-up from slow to fast, okay? And that's important, again, for relaying messages from the brain to the muscles and not over-activating it too soon, too fast. It will cause CNS burnout. Injuries will increase. Next thing, flexibility. Flexibility is what? Range of motion among the muscles. So working on range of motion among the muscles. Again, not static stretching. Static stretching prior to workouts has been shown to be detrimental. But putting our legs and our limbs into a range of motion that is conducive to the muscles. Then we're looking at mobility. That's RAM on the joints, so range of motion amongst the joints. So again, not specifically working on anything crazy or pinpointing things, but an overall conglomeration or global viewpoint of getting our clients more mobile. And then obviously the big one, exercise technique, right? Again, we want to have the ability to go ahead and construct and instruct and warm up that follows protocols that are conducive to the exercise they will be doing in the workout. So let's go into one of the most difficult things, which is exercise order. So sequencing. When we're talking sequencing, we're talking about order of operations. So for this particular thing, warm up, right? So warm up will always have a couple components. It'll have function, right? And it will also have slow to fast, as we talked about. Okay, and then we're also going to talk about easy to complex. Okay, so while some of the stuff seems harder when you look at it, for instance, our baby roll to a hip bridge, or that seems a very complex movement, but it's very functional. So first 4 or so exercises are very functional. Functional means the ability to do something that is functional to outside parameters, right? So things that we can apply right away to everyday lives and activities for daily living. So while, we don't really necessarily roll over every day, we do a lot of rolling over. We lose that ability from our childhood to being adulthood. We become very stiff, and we lose that kind of primitive, that's another catchphrase, primitive movement patterns. And that's what our first 4 exercises do. We then want to go into stuff that is more slow moving, right? So if you're thinking of slow moving, Spider-Man stretch, right? Very slow. It's not a fast, rapid movement. We're talking about lunges, bodyweight squats. Again, not very fast movements. But as you can see, when we go from Spider-Man to our squats, to our lateral lunges, now it's becoming a little bit faster compared to the first 4 exercises, right? And then we go easy to complex, right? So we might go Spider-Man stretch to, let's say, marches to, let's go with skips, all right? So obviously there's a transition or flow or program design element that goes from easiest to hardest. And then obviously we go from slow heart rate to rapid. So with all this going on, our heart rate is a little slower for the first 4 exercises, increases from the slow to fast, and then easy to complex, our heart rate is increasing. So by the time they hit that high knees or jumping jacks at the end of the 7 minutes and 40 seconds or so, their heart rate should be going, a little bit of sweat. Then we know our oxygen is going to our muscles appropriately. Good blood flow is happening. We know that we hit the central nervous system correctly because it's responding, and that response is gauged by us, making sure that their technique is correct. So again, let's go over a couple things of warm-up. Warm-up is designed to, 1, increase blood flow, right? 2, CNS activation. 3, functional movements. Reiterating functional movements. Another thing we can talk about is joint-by-joint approach. So remember, everything that we talk about with warm-ups is very joint-based, okay? So let's take a look at a skeleton here. Okay, we got ankle. We got our knee, we got our hip, low back, upper back, shoulder. All right, so we look at how are these things play a role into mobility. So our ankle is very mobile, right? So we go a mobile joint. Our knee is a stable joint. Our hip is mobile. Low back is stable. And our upper back and shoulder is mobile. Upper back is also mobile. It has some stability in it as well. So how do you know if one thing is mobile or not? Let's look at the joints, right? Ankle is not a hinge joint. It is a kind of a wide open joint, right? It's very flexible. It has a 360-degree almost rotation. Obviously, you can't turn your foot backwards, but we have a lot of movement in there, okay? As compared to the knee joint, which is very hinge-based movement, right? The ankle is kind of like a ball and socket. Now, it's not a ball and socket, but it's like that where you have a lot of range of motion through it. The knee, on the other hand, is a hinge joint. Only has one job. Boom, boom, right? And we go up to our hip, ball and socket. A lot of mobility in there, a lot of things to worry about. Our low back, right? Our low back is very stable, meant for this and this. That is all, okay? Flexion, flexion. Our shoulder joint, ball and socket, a lot of mobility. And then we go ahead and look at thoracic. While it's very stable, it can only rotate. It's also a little bit more mobile in terms of our spine, okay? The more mobility in our spine is higher up than it is lower, okay? So that's where we get the joint-by-joint approach. That all ties in to our warm-up and how we create it, okay? It all ties into that functional movement or primitive patterns. Then it goes into the blood flow and all that stuff, because obviously we need a lot of blood flow to the large muscles of our body. Again, reiterating that blood flow allows for oxygen to get to our muscles, prepares them for work. In that turn, central nervous system going from easy to more complex is priming the system. So think about it, it's oiling the system or oiling a car and putting oil in there to kind of lube up the joints and get ready to go. And then finally, we want to put that easy to hard into technique and put the gasoline in the car and get ready to go. So at the warm-up, at the end of the warm-up, they should be sweating. They should feel warm or hot. Heart rate should be elevated, not to a crazy thing, but elevated to somewhere around 80% of their max heart rate. And we want them to have some effort into that warm-up. And that is what the warm-up is all about. So I hope you enjoyed it, guys. This is module 1 of what is a warm-up.